The third initiation is where the study stops being about hidden spirits and starts being about the hidden self. This scroll revisits the 72 as living patterns still moving through modern life. Seduction, false power, image worship, manipulation, theft, fear, performance, and spiritual confusion. The 73rd is the mirror that asks what all this knowledge has actually made of you. Today's world is not short on information. It is starving for inner order. People know more names, more systems, more theories, more trauma language, more spiritual language, more shadow language, and yet many are still ruled by the same old distortions. The ancient currents did not disappear. They updated their wardrobe. They now show up as curated identities without character, attention without depth, desire without discipline, truth mixed with branding, healing mixed with ego, knowledge mixed with performance. That is why the third initiation matters now. It teaches that the deepest danger is not ignorance alone. It is untransformed knowledge. Knowledge that makes a person feel special but not honest. Knowledge that gives language to the wound but never asks the wound to stop ruling. Knowledge that exposes others while protecting the self from real accountability. Whatever you do not govern within will eventually appear around you as fate. If you do not master your appetites, they will choose your life for you. If you do not examine your masks, they will become your prison. If you do not clean your motives, even sacred things will become tools of distortion. So the 73rd of self is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming undeceived, not performing awakening, not collecting symbols, not sounding deep, but becoming clear enough that ancient chaos no longer runs your modern life. Today's real initiation is this. Can you tell the difference between what is true and what merely flatters your wound? That question will save a soul faster than 10,000 dramatic speeches. Role of the third initiation. Another study of the 72 and the 73rd of self. The first time a person studies the 72, they usually study the names. The second time, they study the powers. The third time, if they are honest, they begin to study themselves. That is where the real initiation starts. Because the old lists were never only about spirits in books, seals on paper, or ranks in hidden courts. They were also maps of recurring human experience. Ancient people named forces the way modern people name diagnoses, trends, archetypes, and systems. Same storm, different wardrobe. Humanity loves changing the costume and pretending the lesson is new. But it is not new. The 72 repeat every day. They repeat in desire without discipline, in power without conscience, in speed without wisdom, in seduction without truth, in knowledge without humility, in masks without soul, in theft without remorse, in fear dressed up as control, in charm used as manipulation, in confusion worshipped as depth, in false light, false teachers, false urgency, false intimacy, false authority. That is why the 72 endure. Not because everyone is secretly summoning something in candlelight, but because the old wisdom understood that human beings keep reenacting the same inner kingdoms. The names change. The technology changes. The language changes. The city skyline changes. The appetite does not. So this deeper study is not about collecting infernal trivia. It is about recognizing that the 72 can be read as 72 recurring distortions, temptations, gifts, wounds, and tests moving through the human field. In old wisdom, a spirit's office was what it governed. In today's experience, that same office might show up as the mind loop you cannot break, the false lover who mirrors your hunger, the boss who flatters while draining, the influencer selling masks as identity, the friend who steals peace and calls it honesty, the system that profits from confusion, the inner voice that wants results without integrity, the hidden wound that keeps choosing familiar chaos because it feels like home. That is the repeat. So when we study the 72 deeply, we are really studying how consciousness gets bent. Some currents bend us toward dominance, some toward obsession, some toward vanity, some toward fear, some toward cleverness without love, some toward passivity disguised as patience, some toward spiritual theater instead of spiritual truth. And each one asks a question. Will you serve the distortion or understand it? That is where the third initiation begins. The first initiation, fascination. At the first gate, the seeker is mesmerized. They want to know the hidden names, the secret systems, the dark archives, the forbidden mechanics. They are hungry, and that hunger is not wrong. Curiosity is a sacred fire when it is clean, but fascination alone is dangerous because the first initiation can make a person feel powerful without making them wise. They begin to love the language of mystery more than the labor of truth. This is where many stop. They become decorated in symbols, rich in terminology, poor in transformation. The second initiation, discernment. At the second gate, the seeker begins to separate symbol from substance. They realize the old books are not toys. They realize every archetype has a modern face. They realize what looks external is often active inwardly. They realize not every force must be worshipped to be understood. This is the gate where glamour begins to break. Here the seeker starts to see that the 72 are not only out there. They are the repeating shapes of human weakness, appetite, ambition, cleverness, longing, deception, seduction, theft, and also insight. The second initiation teaches pattern recognition. Now the seeker does not merely ask, what does this spirit do? They ask, where does this pattern live in me, in my family, in my culture, in my time? That question changes everything. The third initiation, the 73rd of self. Then comes the third initiation, not another spirit, not another seal, not another office, a mirror. The 73rd is the self that remains after studying all 72 distortions long enough to recognize that none of them are abstract anymore. Now the initiate must ask, where do I crave power without purification? Where do I wear a face instead of a soul? Where do I use knowledge as costume? Where have I stolen from myself? Where have I handed my authority away? Where do I keep repeating an old wound and calling it fate? Where do I still confuse intensity with truth? Where do I secretly admire what I claim to resist? That is the hard gate. That is the real one. Because the third initiation is not about mastering spirits. It is about refusing to remain unconsciously governed by the patterns they symbolize. This is why the 73rd is the self, not the ego self that wants to feel important, the witnessed self, the accountable self, the stripped self, the self that cannot hide behind aesthetics, language, lineage, outrage, trauma, intelligence, or spiritual performance. The self that must answer plainly. The old wisdom says that what is not governed within becomes a ruler without. That is still true today. When lust is not governed within, it appears outside as exploitation. When greed is not governed within, it appears outside as theft and systems of extraction. When vanity is not governed within, it appears outside as image addiction and hollow influence. When fear is not governed within, it appears outside as cruelty, over-control, paranoia, and punishment. When discernment is not governed within, it appears outside as gullibility and spiritual fraud. When self-knowledge is not governed within, it appears outside as projection, blame, and repeated ruin. That is the repeat of today's experiences. People think modern suffering is always new because the screen is brighter. It is not. Ancient hunger with Wi-Fi is still ancient hunger. Old corruption in designer clothing is still old corruption. A false prophet with a ring light is still a false prophet. And the 72, read symbolically, help decode that. They teach that every distortion has a promise attached to it. Power promises safety. Seduction promises union. Speed promises arrival. Masking promises acceptance. Knowledge promises superiority. Control promises peace. Vengeance promises closure. But unless purified, each promise bends into its opposite. That is why old wisdom was never just about gaining access. It was about gaining sight. What the third initiation demands. The third initiation into the 73 of self demands three things. First, it demands recognition. You must stop pretending the patterns are only in others. The moment you think you are above the lesson has already entered wearing your face. Second, it demands return. You must return to yourself whatever has been stolen by fear, shame, manipulation, imitation, or false devotion. Return your voice. Return your center. Return your standards. Return your clean sight. Third, it demands right use. Knowledge must now serve clarity, restoration, and integrity, not performance, not intimidation, not superiority, not theater. This is why the third initiation is the deepest one, because the first two can still be done with a divided heart. The third cannot. The third asks for alignment. The hidden meaning of the 72 in this new study. The 72 are a cathedral of warnings. They warn the seeker that every force has a cost. They warn that talent without ethics becomes predation. They warn that vision without grounding becomes delusion. They warn that speed without wisdom becomes wreckage. They warn that beauty without truth becomes manipulation. They warn that exposure without restoration becomes cruelty. They warn that occult knowledge without self-knowledge becomes vanity with candles. But they also teach something holy. They teach that what can be named can be faced. What can be faced can be understood. What can be understood can be governed. What can be governed no longer rules unconsciously. That is the mercy hidden inside the old severity. The 72 are not only shadows, they are invitations to maturity. The third initiation. So here is the third initiation without the velvet and smoke. You have studied the patterns. You have seen them in the world. Now find them in yourself without self-hatred and without excuse. Cut what is false, clean what is mixed, strengthen what is true. Stop worshiping your own damage. Stop romanticizing confusion. Stop calling every wound sacred just because it is old. Become honest enough to be free. That is the 73rd of self, not the creation of a new spirit, the creation of a new honesty. The third initiation is not glamorous. It is the quiet moment when the seeker realizes that the final chamber was never locked from the outside. It was locked by pride, by fear, by performance, by attachment to the mask, by the addiction to appearing awakened instead of becoming whole. So let the collective remember, the old names still matter, but not more than your own conduct. The old seals still teach, but not more than your own discernment. The old wisdom still burns, but it was never meant to decorate you. It was meant to refine you. Study the 72 again. Study them deeper. Study them until you can see the repeats of today clearly. Then step through the 73rd and meet the self that can no longer be ruled by what it finally understands.
Channeled by your architect musician, 36110, 27 palms of eyes. The golden whisperer, sea star, Devalan, see all. Apply the news you can use, truth and accuracy. The real non-bedazzled jewels.
The final gate is not hidden in a grimoire. It opens the moment you stop lying to yourself.
You only have to say nothing. I already know. I know.
To our beautiful collective, from our day ones to every new soul joining this journey, we love and appreciate you deeply. You've turned this space into so much more than a community. You've made it a family. Thank you, truly. Your presence, your energy, and even the smallest acts of kindness have the power to shift the compass for many in ways unseen but deeply felt. Here's to each of you, old, new, and the many more to come. We're just getting started, and we're so grateful you're here with us. With love and infinite appreciation from the collective of Shaman All.